Hello, in today's video we'll be replacing the spark plugs on this 2013 Chevy Malibu. Being a turbo model, you'll want to replace these every 60,000 miles, sooner than you would a non-turbo model with iridiums. And this one's at about 80,000 miles, so a bit past that mileage. So to begin, we'll be using a T30 Torx bit, which will need to remove the 3 screws that hold the engine cover on. And as with all the bolts in this video, we'll want to rotate them counterclockwise to remove them. Now we'll follow that up by removing the oil fill cap. And with that, our engine cover is ready to come out. Let's put the engine oil cap back on so nothing falls in. Now we're ready to begin with our first spark plug. The first thing we want to do is disconnect the connector. And to do this, we'll need to slide this red lock clip back, and this will allow us to push in on the connector tab. And once you do that, we can slide back and disconnect the connector. This little black tab is what we want to push in on. Now to remove the ignition coil. We'll want to use a 10mm socket for the retaining bolt. And all we want to do is break them loose. The rest we can remove by hand. You may wonder why I'm removing both at once. I guess story time. This was also the first part of fixing the misfire video, which I posted last week. So what I'm doing is a switcheroo on the ignition coils to see if the misfire swaps cylinder location. So then after figuring out that issue, I decided to replace the spark plugs while I was at it, since they've never been replaced. And with that bolt removed, let's go ahead and slide out the coil. Now to remove the spark plug, we'll want to use a 5/8 spark plug socket with a 6-inch extension. Let's go ahead and remove the spark plug. Once you got the spark plug socket fully seated, using a ratchet you'll want to turn it counterclockwise. The longer the ratchet you use, the easier it'll be to loosen. Once you got it loose enough, just remove the rest by hand. And here's our old spark plug. Nothing obviously wrong with it, just replacing them before they can cause problems. And these are the spark plugs I'll be using. They're AC Dalco Iridiums, which come pre-gapped, but it's always a good practice to check the gap before install. And these plugs for this car should be gapped at a 0.035. When checking your gap, you'll slide the tool between the center electrode tip and the ground electrode, and you'll want to feel a slight drag. So far I'm noticing that they're all coming out slightly over gapped, but nothing worth regapping all of them for. It's probably only like 2 thousandths off. We'll also want to add some anti-seize to the threads. This will keep your spark plugs from seizing to the aluminum head. Like that noise that you heard earlier when removing the spark plugs, well, that's from how dry and rusty they can become, and this will help prevent that, or worse. You don't want to add too much though. A little bit will go a long way. Just add a little bit to the top threads, avoiding getting any on the tip portion. Then as you install a spark plug, it'll coat the threads throughout the spark plug and the cylinder head. Now that we got them all checked and prepared, let's get back to the install. We'll want to thread the spark plug in as far as it goes by hand, so you avoid damaging the threads on the cylinder head.
I'll get the keys.
And now we can snug it up with the ratchet and torque it to spec with the torque wrench. Now onto our number 1 spark plug. We'll push up the lock clip. Now press down on the tab to disconnect the connector. Loosen and remove the ignition coil bolt. And now remove the ignition coil. Now for the spark plug. And once you break it loose, just remove the remainder by hand. Now for the new spark plug, thread it in as far as you can by hand, and then tighten it and or torque it to spec. With the coil on, tighten the bolt, reinstall the connector, then the lock clip. Well, I finally got the new replacement ignition coil, so let's put this one in, which I guess looks different due to a redesign, but it is the same brand as the original. Then tighten it down with the ratchet. Followed by the connector, and finally the lock clip. Onto our third spark plug. Push up lock clip, remove the connector. Loosen and remove the ignition coil bolt plus the coil. Now loosen and remove the spark plug. And install the new one. Now tighten the spark plug. Sometimes you may pull out the extension and find that the spark plug socket stayed on the spark plug. Well, the way I remove it so they pull out together, I pull slightly at an angle, which you will notice I do on every plug. It works really good for me. Tighten the ignition coil bolt and reinstall the connector. Onto spark plug number 4. Remove the connector, then the ignition coil. Followed by the spark plug. Finally, install the remaining spark plug. Now tighten it. Install the coil with the bolt. Tighten that bolt and reinstall the connector. Now for the final piece, the engine cover, the oil fill cap, plus the 3 hold down bolts. And with that, the spark plug replacement is complete. And now to finalize it, let's start the car. Well, I hope you found this video helpful and informative. If so, please click that thumbs up button to support my video and my channel. And please subscribe if you haven't done so.